Brilliant. So hi everyone, and welcome to this session, which is the third in our AI virtual series that the CIPR Education and Skills Group has run. I'm Christine Richardson, I'm one of the committee members, and today we're going to be talking about how to put AI into practice and make sure we can get the most out of some of the tools that are available. So I'm really delighted to welcome James Robinson and Carmen Lai from Weber Shandwick. James has more than 2 decades of digital comms expertise, and in his current role, he consults with clients all over the world on their AI adoption strategies, integration, and transformation, and has worked with the likes of IBM, Nestle, Mars, etc., to help maximize the impact by embracing generative AI. And Carmen has more than 17 years of experience in media, digital marketing, and technology, and works in the digital health team, and is a huge believer in the potential for technology to transform the health landscape. And she's worked a lot with the pharmaceutical industry to drive digital transformation and leverage emerging technologies like AI. So between them, they've got huge amounts of experience and expertise, and they've also run loads of workshops like this around helping companies embrace AI. I was lucky enough to attend a taster session that Weber Shandwick held last year, and I found it really useful. So I know that we're in for a really informative and engaging session. So I won't waste any more time talking. I'll hand over to James and Carmen. We will probably they'll present probably for about 30-40 minutes, and there should be some time for questions at the end. So please do add these to the chat box. So James and Carmen, over to you.
Perfect, thanks. Really good introduction. You didn't need to mention the 2 decades of experience. That's fine. Don't worry about that next time. Yeah, like Christine said, myself and Carmen, we are part of the digital comms and AI function at Weber Shandwick. And as part of that, we have had some very frequent and comprehensive conversations around generative AI and how you apply generative AI across comms functions over the last 18 months. And we hope that some of that learning comes through today in this session. So we are used to running quite extensive and comprehensive training sessions with our clients and others in the industry. But today what we want to do is really focus on the practical application and take you through a few steps that we hope you'll be able to take away and use back at your desk. So the first challenge is to share. And I'm going to bring up some slides. If somebody could give me a thumbs up, that would be great. Is that working for everyone?
Yeah, all looks good.
Perfect. So what we're here today to discuss is like we said, not the big stuff. It's not the kind of huge number of incomprehensible ways that generative AI is going to impact us, our industry, and the world at large. I'm sure you've seen plenty of those presentations, and what we find resonates the most with the clients that we talk to and the people in the industry that we have conversations with is about how we can really apply our learnings to become more practical. So generative AI in the form that we know it and has been so accessible for the last 18 months is hugely accessible and hugely easy to use. There's not really a user interface. There's often no fees associated. There's no training required or specialist capabilities. But what we found is that very nature of it being so easy to access and so easy to use has actually held some people back in a kind of counterintuitive way. So what we try to do is move people beyond that. And that's what part of this session is about. So the first 10 minutes or so, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the tools that we use. There are tens of thousands of tools out there, and you probably constantly receive emails and promotions around different types of tools that you could use for comms and other purposes. So we're going to talk a little bit about the tools that we use and how to use them through prompting. Then one piece that we think everyone finds valuable when we run these sessions is a demo that relates and is relevant to the work we do on an everyday basis. So that seems to be really where people become most engaged. Even those that are using the tools on a kind of a regular basis find some value in that, and it helps people get past that initial hurdle or initial inertia of using the tools. That will take, I mean, Carmen might laugh because I always say it will take about 20-30 minutes, and in other sessions it normally takes like an hour or two. So we're going to speed through that. We've made a really what we think is quite a slick, useful demo. So hopefully we'll get that through that in good time. And like Christine said, we're aiming to leave kind of 15, 20 minutes at the end for a quick chat. But before we jump in, I can't see any of you, and I'm not sure I can see any of your reactions, but by way of using a reaction, like maybe a thumbs up or a heart, it'd be really good to get an understanding of how many people on this call use generative AI tools regularly for work. Now, this might be the first tech issue. I'm seeing in the chat that there's a number of responses coming up. Okay. So not loads from what I can see. What we generally find is that even on the agency side and with kind of comms teams and innovations teams at some of the biggest brands in the world, even from the likes of IBM and McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Ericsson, still comms teams aren't adopting the tools. So if you feel like you haven't made that initial step or you're not getting the most out of them, then you're definitely not alone in that regards. And part of the reason for that is often because it takes a little bit of experimentation and a little bit of bravery to move beyond the initial hype. So what you can see here is the kind of we've started referring it to it as the depression curve of AI use, but it's essentially the journey that most people go through when it comes to adopting generative AI tools. So if you think, for those of you that have used the tools and think back to when you first probably used ChatGPT as your first tool, you might have been blown away by the output that it gave you, the response that it gave you, the level of detail, how articulate and eloquent it was about particular topics, and how confident it was. But then whether that fills you with dread or hope, you soon, if the longer you use the tools, get to a point where you think, hold on, wait a minute, that eloquence and that confidence is maybe a bit misplaced, because sometimes I'm noticing a lot of repetition. I'm noticing a lot of generic ideas and thought processes. I'm seeing inaccuracies. I'm seeing a lot of bias. And that can really get people to struggle with thinking whether the tools are valuable for them, and ultimately maybe reach point 3, which is, damn, this stuff isn't working for me at all. I'm going to leave it. And we've heard many stories from colleagues and clients alike where they initially just have a bad experience and they cut off. Now, our ambition is to help walk people through that point to the point of understanding. So step 4, that actually, okay, I know how to use these tools. I know when to use them and what for and what they're good at. And then you get to a point where you can really think, okay, let's go. These are fully integrated into my everyday work routine, and then making me a much better professional, a much stronger communicator. So hopefully today, if any of you are kind of hovering in 1, 2, or 3, we will get you to the first initial steps of getting to point 4 and onwards to point 5. Now, I mentioned ChatGPT because that's the tool that most people use and everyone talks about that. And it also goes hand in hand with the hype. But what we have also found is that people rely on ChatGPT for maybe too much. There are other tools available, and we'll walk through some of those today to help me move people beyond that kind of narrow mindset of, okay, generative AI is great at writing me a first draft of a press release and a social post, but not really applying the technology much beyond that. And that's because the tools aren't a one-size-fits-all situation. Now, in other presentations, we have this really scary slide that basically has these tiny, tiny, tiny logos of thousands of different tools that you could be choosing from. But what we found is that generally we are using a selection of tools, anywhere between kind of half a dozen to a dozen, that categorize into sense, search, and create. And we think that this really helps us understand what tool we should be using for what purpose. And I know that we're going to share these slides afterwards, so there's no need to start writing these down. We can send the links and send use cases for them. But in sense is all about understanding your landscape, your audience, your industry, the topics that are driving conversation and sentiment, commercial trends, everything you need to know to operate in the world you operate in. Then there's search. So that's finding time relevant, critical information in quick and easy ways to understand that help you obtain information that you can then use to move on to creating whatever it is you want to create. Now, like I said, a lot of people kind of get fixated on the creation part and often don't really linger in the sense and search phases. And Carmen will be walking through a demo shortly to kind of help show how we might be able to do that. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to try to immerse you across a whole range of tools in the time we have available today. We'll actually be focusing on just two. So we're going to be looking at Perplexity and we're going to look at ChatGPT, because for the most part, they can do pretty much everything you need, and they are free to access and easy to use. So we thought that that might be really useful for some of you on the call. But before we get into talking about how to use the tools and showing you some thought starters about use cases of how to use them, we really wanted to encourage a mindset shift. So some of the conversations that come up in our discussions and panels are around, I used the tool and the return it gave me wasn't great, so I had to do most of the work myself, or I just gave up using the tool and went back to my old methods, which is fine, but we need to be a bit more persistent. And the reason that people kind of default to that mindset is because we are used to using, technology that has quite narrow user interfaces, or technology that has the process by which you would put in a simple search or command and you'd get your final output. So here we often talk about running a Google search. We are used to inputting our search, getting a standardized response. Every time we put that search in again, we'd pretty much get the same response, and we'd try and work with what we have. But actually, when you're using generative AI tools, that is more for kind of automation, and automation isn't where it's at for comms, because the first output is never the right output. What we need to do is work with these tools in a way that is more, I guess, human in its nature. It's more relationship based. So we are going through this iterative process when we use generative AI tools. The first prompt you put in is never the final prompt. You'll get an AI output. And what we try to relate this to is, if you were working with a human copywriter or designer, you would never take their first design or piece of copy back and think, okay, that's fine. Well, you might if they're great, but usually not. So what we would do is give feedback, and we would critique that. So we'd say, well, I like the title, but the second paragraph needs tightening, or it's maybe a bit too conservative in its tone. Could it be a little bit more informal? And we go through this process of back and forth until we get to a point where we can layer in our human intelligence, our human experience and empathy and knowledge around the topic, to make sure that what we're getting out of AI is relevant for our audience. And everything should always be fact-checked, validated, verified, and kind of translated into a human tone. So ultimately, what we're producing is a human piece of content that has been supported and expedited by generative AI tools. And when you go through that process of understanding what tools to use and how to use them, you start to learn where they excel and where they struggle. And they excel in probably all the ways that we're aware of or could kind of anticipate they would be good at. Great first drafts of text, or teaching you about a topic, really good at translation and improving every day, good for image inspiration and thought starters and content. But there are areas, really important areas, where they struggle. So they struggle often, especially ChatGPT, of being timely and up to date. They are prone to errors because they are training themselves to make connections and patterns out of huge, vast data sets. And sometimes they get that wrong. Maths they struggle with because all they see is a floating array of numbers that don't necessarily connect in a logical way. You'll start to see this echo chamber of unoriginality and mediocre content coming through with a surface level understanding. And of course, because the world is biased, it means the internet is biased, and it means the output from generative AI is biased unless you work in a way that helps mitigate that. And then, quite confusingly, and we've never really got to the bottom of why, word count. If you ask ChatGPT for a 500 word piece, it will get kind of in a range, but it won't nail it. So if you're, doing an awards application that has a very stringent word count, maybe not the way to go unless you willing to do plenty of editing. So to make the most of those tools, and we'll go into this more in the demo where I think it will all come to light, to make sure that you get a good output that kind of leverages the areas that the tools excel on and mitigate against those that it struggles on, you need a good prompt. So you might have heard of the theory of prompt engineering, which is essentially how you input your command into the tool to specify what you want to come out of it. And, you can have very, very detailed prompts, but generally there are some core tenets to follow. So we're going to go through here about how you build a text prompt and then how you build a visual prompt. And then we'll get into how we put that into practice. You might have seen either on LinkedIn or through other training sessions, all of these like wild and wonderful ways of how to remember how to prompt. So they might be acronyms of create or craft or text. And then each of the letters stands for a different thing to remember. But really, they fundamentally break down into three key areas. You need to tell the tool who you want it to be or who you are to help it understand the direction of the output. You want clear instructions of what you want the output to be, and then you want to specify the tone. So here, for example, we've got one that we've developed for our health team, which is around pretending you're a professional communication strategist for a non-profit organization specializing in AIDS and HIV prevention. So we've really clarified where we want or what voice we want the output to come from. Then we're going to be quite clear on what we want. So here we're imagining that we have an outline that we've already structured with different sections and different areas we want to complete that we would paste underneath. And we're instructing the tool to give us a roughly 1,000-word strategic communications report for experts in the field. So for experts within AIDS and HIV space. And then because we have those experts, we want the tone to be professional. So that's the basic building of a text prompt. And then once you've built that, you can get into a whole conversation, kind of back and forth Socratic process with the generative AI tools to tweak the outputs, like we said, that up and down iterative approach. Now that's a fairly standardized prompt, but you can go as deep on the detail as you need because we have experience and knowledge of the topic that we're working on generally. So here we've got a prompt that's maybe slightly more comprehensive around strategy. So what you'll notice here is in the persona, we are saying that we have extensive experience and that we're familiar with certain theories of thought leaders in the space. And we're making sure to input that in because then the generative AI has reference points, specific reference points from which to pull from. So we're putting in, again, an outline and asking for a strategic marketing plan, but we're asking for it to be formatted with headings and subheadings. We're saying what the plan of the output is, and that it should be structured with clear sections, and we've outlined the sections there. And then we want to make sure that the tone is professional, authoritative, but we've taken that one level further where we're asking for principles and theories from Kotler and Cialdini, who we know are thought leaders in the space that we're covering. So I would say that, take some time to think about the prompts that you're putting into the tools because that will improve the output. But also, if you're ever struggling, this tool here was actually written by ChatGPT itself. So I went on and said, I need to create a prompt for some training for my strategy colleagues. I gave it a little bit of guidance and I said, can you give me a prompt? And it followed this structure that I asked it. So if you're ever feeling like you've got writer's block or you don't know where to start, you can just ask the tool what you want it to do or to help you achieve what you want to achieve. And then if we think about image prompts kind of follow a similar direction whereby they have a certain structure, but actually what we need to do is be a little bit more creative and a little bit more descriptive with what we're seeing, a bit more visual, a bit more visceral. So here we've really quickly created a photograph of a cabin in a thunderstorm. But what we've done is we've made sure to describe what's in the scene. So we've made sure to specify that it's during a thunderstorm, that the cabin should give off a cozy feel, and then it's illuminated within, and then it's in stormy skies and rain-soaked surroundings. Then we have how the scene feels. So we want it to be dramatic, but also we know that we want this to be cinematic in its quality. And we've even specified the type of equipment that it could be used to take that photograph. And then finally, how the scene's set up. So we want to make sure that the cabin is in the foreground and it's got a moody backdrop of the thunderstorm in the background, and it has cinematic lighting and it's 8K in its quality, so it feels crisp and clean. So the one thing I should say about image prompts is that, again, you can ask ChatGPT or Perplexity or other tools for the prompt. So if you say, I want to have a picture of a cabin, can you help me build a prompt? It will give you a prompt and then you can put that into your image generator. So you don't need to necessarily have this kind of artistic background and really poetic way of describing images. So that is that. Hopefully that kind of helps set up what we're going to get into next. And I'm going to hand over to Carmen for a demo, and she'll walk through a hypothetical scenario. And in the background, I will be inputting prompts into a number of tools to help you see how that comes to life. So I'm going to stop sharing. At this point, we would usually ask for questions, but I think we'll hold until the end so that you can see the theory that we've just discussed really put into practice for the tools. And again, I need to share my screen.
Share screen. You can start getting that set up. Yep.
Hope that this works. I'm going to hand over to you, Carmen, while I try and set this up.
Yeah, awesome. So there are going to be a few tools that we show you today, and then for a speed sake, and because they're free, we're going to run through a demo that uses just 2 or 3 of them. But first, we want to give you a bit of an overview of the main ones that we would use in our work. So we'll start with ChatGPT, actually, because I think that's the one that arguably, as James said, is the most famous of the generative AI models. It's what they call a foundational model, and the current iteration of that is 4 Omni, which you can see in the top left-hand corner. That just came with significant improvements in the language and the image processing that they have. It is typically used for content generation, both in terms of text, and also there is an image creation tool called DALL-E, which is built into ChatGPT as well. And we're going to show you quite a bit of ChatGPT today and its functionality. The next one will be Perplexity. And one of the most significant criticisms of generative AI is that you can't really see where the data is coming from. And so for that, we have Perplexity, which is an AI-powered referenced search engine that provides natural language answers. It is not a foundational model. It's actually powered with GPT, but the benefit is that it is up to date, unlike a couple of the other tools that we know about, and it allows you to see the references of where it's pulled its data from and then remove them if you don't like them. And we'll show you quite a bit of Perplexity today as well. Consensus is the next tool. It's not a tool that we'll really go into today, but just so you know about it, it is definitely a tool that our health and B2B teams find particularly useful. Again, it is GPT powered, but the data set is more than 200 million academic research papers, and it ranks the papers by relevance, it summarizes them, and then it will actually synthesize the answers to provide you with a really concise reply. Particularly useful for fact checking, or when you need something that is quite reliable and reference based. You can use a number of the filters as well, so that you restrict it to a certain time band or certain countries that it searches in. That demo is taking a little bit of time to come up, but you can sort of see there is the summary, there's the papers underneath, and there's a consensus meter on the right that basically tells you whether or not in general the consensus is yes, no, or possibly. Next Atlas, I think, is the next tool that we'll go through. It's been around for more than a decade, actually, providing consumer insights and trends. The modern day iteration of it is that it tags more than 300,000 influencers and thought leaders, and it tracks their public online activity. And so from that activity, it generates reports about insights. And the difference today is that we now have a generate function that allows us to query those reports and extract direct answers to our questions, as opposed to you having to read all of the reports yourself. It's just generating an answer for us there. Really depends on bandwidth a lot of the time. So you can just sort of see it's actually gotten that data from a number of reports of its own, and those reports come from the information that it's extracted from social media and the general public. We just want to reference, I suppose, a couple of the other image generation tools that are available. We may touch on them a little bit today. You may hear about things like Leonardo and also Midjourney and Firefly, which is by Adobe. And each of those models are text to image or text to video. There's a couple of things that you can do with them. They've all got their own quirks. They've got their own levels of control as well, and how you use them probably differs just slightly. And you're only going to learn that by sort of delving into the documentation. You'll probably end up with a favorite model, and as we certainly do on the team as well. And so experimenting with these tools, I think, is really encouraging. Most of them do have like a free layer So if you want to get into that afterwards, then by all means do so. So we're going to move to the demo now. And as I said before, we're mainly going to focus on Perplexity and ChatGPT. We're going to set up a bit of a scenario for you, and it's that we have a new job. It is our first day at a new employer. The company is a confectionery company, and we feel a little bit out of our depth. And what we want to do is just to come up to speed as soon as possible. And so what we're going to ask Perplexity to do is to give us a bit of an overview of the UK chocolate industry, and we want some key commercial trends that we should be aware of. And you can actually see the way that Perplexity breaks down your question and how it thinks, the sources that it's looking at, and if you don't like any of those sources, you can actually click on them and remove them at some point. Right, so premiumization, value, health conscious indulgence, sustainability and ethics, a couple of key themes for us to think about there. Mindful indulgence. Right. This is really good as an overview, but what we actually want to do is to look at some of the industry reports that we've pulled as well and incorporate that into the general search of what we're looking at. So we want to pull some key themes from two of the reports that we've sourced beforehand. There's a couple that James is just loading now. And what we're going to ask it to do is there anything in these reports that relate to the key theme of, let's go with the health conscious indulgence, because we do see quite a bit of that already. So he's just uploaded the reports there for us, and Perplexity keeps a chat window open, and it understands that you are referencing everything in that chat window until you start a new thread. Okay. So it is pointing out that there are several of the trends in the reports that actually relate to health conscious indulgence. It's given us a nice summary of them there: sugar reduction focus, plant-based and vegan options, things like portion control. That's really good. One of the other things that we probably want to do is understand who's in our space as well. So we're going to ask Perplexity, because it is the most up to date, about the companies that are also selling chocolate as a health conscious indulgence, because that's looking to be our particular positioning. And can we have the brand name and a bit of a sentence about their offer as well? Okay. So it's listed a number of these brands for us, and it's given us a sentence that summarizes the offer. A couple of them specialize in vegan chocolate offers. There is a lot to do with organic, sugar-free, sustainability in there. And so as a follow-up, we're really keen to make a good impression on our new employer. We want to build out a really robust plan to stay ahead of the competition. So we're going to ask Perplexity whether or not they can give us a market positioning for this new chocolate. We know it focuses on health-conscious indulgence, but we want to be able to differentiate it from the brands that you've just given us, and what target audience, including the demographic, should be most receptive for this new chocolate product. Okay, so you can see ProSearch has broken down the question for us. It's got sources, and then it talks about our potential market positioning. So indulge mindfully, premium dark chocolate brand.
I'm going to run that one again
Okay.
and ask it not to be concise, because it was overly concise.
Okay, so it's actually given us a brand name as well, Vital Choc. a premium dark chocolate brand crafted with adaptogenic herbs and superfoods. So it's just given us some product ideas there as well. Guilt-free moment of bliss. It's given us a target demographic of people aged 25 to 40 years. That is a pretty large demographic, I guess. So one of the other things that we can do is a little bit of research using Perplexity. It goes into Reddit, and we can actually use that as part of the pro features. And so what we're going to ask it to do is there anything that we need to know about the demographic of people aged 25 to 40 that is going to help with this positioning of health conscious indulgence? And you can see that James is using the focus option. It's the social button that you see there. It says social, but it's just Reddit when you run the search. And so what it's doing is searching within Reddit to see whether it can understand some of these demographic trends and behaviors that's going to be useful to us as a company, as an employee for a company that sells chocolate. Okay, so transparency and trust. A balanced approach to health. There's a lot of things in there about mental health and well-being. Subtle marketing. We know that we don't want to be too aggressive about it. Social and environmental responsibility, and some lifestyle integration pieces there. So really useful trends for us to pick up. So when we want to move into the strategy part of the demonstration, one of the things that we're going to have to do is shift from Perplexity into ChatGPT. And as I sort of mentioned before, GPT only has the memory from its window. We haven't given it anything to start with. So what we need to do is take the market positioning that Perplexity gave us and put it into GPT so it has something to start with. And what we're going to ask it to do is to write a short and concise communications strategy for us based on this chocolate brand.
We are. Can you remind me what the chocolate brand is called?
Vital Choc.
Okay.
We want it a strategy designed to raise awareness. We're really looking for key messages, a one-line vision statement for each. And as you use this more and more, you will find that it does, as James sort of said earlier, it gets a little bit repetitive maybe. Things aren't necessarily organic. That's really where the AI leaves off and our skill as communicators and marketers comes in. We have to be able to tell whether or not a key message is right and whether or not it's worded correctly. This just gives us a nice starting point so that we're not starting from zero. So you can see it says functional indulgence, ethical sourcing, holistic wellness, premium quality. And so what we want to do is to be able to provisionally test this strategy with our core audience. So 25 to 40-year-olds, we want to create some personas. Let's create 3 of them. We want to run a virtual focus group. Keep the persona detail fairly limited. We want them to react to the key messages that we've just generated above. Tell us which would resonate with them and why. And when you're done, condense those answers into a pithy sentence for each key message because we're going to use those later. So persona 1 is Sarah. There's always a yoga instructor. James, a marketing executive. And Emma, a health blogger. Right, so you can see that I've actually generated a fairly basic persona, and it's actually reacted to those key messages as above. So now that we've got the persona, we've got key messaging, we've got a comms strategy and some positioning, it's time to get our agency involved. So based on the above strategies and the persona feedback, what we would like to do is to create an RFP for a comms agency. It needs to specify that the campaign is required to raise awareness. Vital Choc is the brand name that it's given us. We'll just run with that. And let's ask the agency for a response focused on an integrated campaign across print and social media. So it has generated an RFP for us in rapid time. Oh, slightly stuck. Okay. Submission deadlines. It's given us submission deadlines. It has not provided a budget because I suppose we're supposed to provide that budget as the company. And then we sent that out to agencies. They've actually come back and they've asked us for our brand guidelines. We don't have a logo at this point or a look and feel. So what we're going to do is ask GPT to generate one for us. So a logo or a mood board for Vital Choc needs to contain our brand colors, which are these calming blues and these uplifting yellows, roughly based on color psychology. We want it to look sophisticated, stand out on the shelf, and represent this ethos that we have of health conscious indulgence and key messages. So we can see that ChatGPT is using the DALL-E integration. It can tell that we're asking for an image. So it is powering it with that. One thing that you'll still notice, I suppose, about AI generated images is that the text can be slightly problematic. Text and hands, I think, are the thing that it really sort of struggles with. We see a lot of interesting spelling or interesting characters there, but it is getting better. It's getting better all the time, even from 3.5 to 4, definitely. We see that. We're going to run the same prompt actually so that you can see it work in Leonardo. And then we might actually run that as well in Midjourney. Leonardo does have a free tier if you ever wanted to try using it. I think you get 150 credits for free per month. And then Midjourney does not have a free tier, and I believe Firefly does not either.
No. There is a version of Firefly that you can kind of play around with, but it's a bit more basic than the paid offer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll let those load up.
Yes. We'll let those load up. We will pretend that we've got a response back. The agency appears to have done a terrible job, so they clearly should have gone with Weber Shandwick. And so what we want to do is actually ask GPT for a launch plan. We're going to ask it to launch in the public, develop these 5 creative launch campaigns for a comms strategy based on this pithy sentence that we're copying and pasting into it as well. What we want to do is ensure that it's designed to grab attention and raise awareness of this new product of ours. So you can see how quickly it's generating these creative launch campaigns. Not all of the ideas will be suitable. You may think that some of them are great or not great, but you can see how quickly it does it, and you can then pick and choose from those as to which ones might be relevant to you. Okay, so we have a couple of great ideas there. Pop-up cafes, print and digital ads, social media, a workplace camp, transform your snack time. I like that. And so what we probably want to do then is to generate some content for it. The first thing that we probably need to do is to look at the launch events that we might have. For that, we would want to use Perplexity because Perplexity is more up to date than ChatGPT is. We're going to ask Perplexity to generate a list of 10 major public events or milestone events happening in 2025. We want it to combine a focus on health and wellness, also some that are just fun. And we need to give it that background of who we are and what we're looking at, because this is a new window. Okay. So it's given us a list of things there. Okay. Mighty Hoopla. Let's go with Mighty Hoopla. Early June gives us a nice year to prepare for that. We want to generate some content on that. So we're going to pick a creative route, we're going to pick a persona, and then we're going to align it with the Mighty Hoopla Festival.
Okay, which creative route are we going for?
Let's go with transform your snack time. Oh, it's a workplace campaign, actually. Maybe that's not going to be right.
Indulge with benefits?
Indulge with benefits. Let's go with that.
Okay, one moment, guys. we're building these prompts as we go. So with us. Okay.
Okay, so he's picked Persona James, classic. We're going to align it with the Mighty Hoopla Festival. And we're going to ask for a press release targeted to consumer trends and wellness media.
As well as 2 social media posts for Instagram.
Yeah, sorry. So it's generating a press release for us. Again, like just to reinforce James's point, we would never put any of this content out as is. Still requires a human interaction to make sure that the content is of good quality and sounds really natural. Okay, so the tour highlights interactive pop-up booths, expert insights, immersive experiences, capitalizing on a couple of the key trends there.
And of course, here it's pulling out some of the key product features around the functional ingredients and everything else. Were you to do this for whichever organization you work for, you would already populate it with that level of information, so it wasn't just kind of speculating what your product offers might include.
Instagram posts. You can see that it has also provided some image suggestions for us. You can take those image suggestions and actually turn them into prompts and generate the prompts for, and generate the images via those prompts as well. I think it's always good to provide some inspiration to the design team. And so what we're going to do is create an image to go alongside for the design team. A Polaroid style photograph for a social media post of a Black woman with natural afro hair. You will find that if you don't specify, the tools tend to default to Caucasians. So if you do want to, as we said, combat that bias, we should specify what we're looking for. So she is vibrant and exudes a sense of well-being and happiness. She's eating a bar of chocolate as the sun sets. She's smiling, she's happy, and the view of a festival crowd and a music stage behind her, because this is the Mighty Hoopla Festival. And that is the image that it generates. And you can sort of tell, you know, you might not use that image as is, you probably won't use it as is, but it would be easier to provide that image to a designer and tell them that you want this style of image, but actually you want, you know, not to be at sunset. Maybe it needs to be at sunrise. Maybe the background needs to change. Maybe the chocolate needs to be white chocolate instead of dark chocolate. There's a lot of different things that you can do to the image, but that is a good starting point and easier to communicate to designers off this basis rather than describing the entire thing from scratch. So James,
I'm just demonstrating here again that iterative process of where you're able to kind of change as you go. So I went from the initial image, added a tattoo because we wanted to feel a little bit edgier, and then also the art directors realized that we don't have any of our brand colors in, so we've brought back in those blues and yellows that we put in the logo and the mood board.
Right. So we've gone live with the post. The social campaign is up, but the community manager has actually just flagged something that we're getting some negative feedback from a group of environmental activists and their followers, and they're protesting against deforestation for cocoa plantations. And this is really serious for us. So what we want to do is use AI to rapidly generate a holding statement for use on social media using these key messages that we already have, as well as a Q&A document that can help us to respond. Okay. So I think, you know, with crisis response and issues management, it can often be about the speed with which you respond and how you actually align that. It's a very stressful time as well. So these tools can help you do that in a really rapid manner and make sure that you align to the key messages that you have above. You can use it as a blueprint and then make variations on that as you see fit.
I think that's the last of our
Yes.
demo prompts.
Yeah. Did any of the other images end up generating on?
Oh, let's have a look.
Journey?
Yep.
Okay, so we can see are those blueberries? Okay, new product idea, great, blueberries. And you can see that there's a slightly different style when it comes to Leonardo versus what you've generated in DALL-E. And then Midjourney as well will have a different style too.
That wasn't working for me.
Oh, okay, that wasn't working. Yeah, and Firefly. Yeah.
I think that is our
Mm,
demo done, and we've left 13 minutes, which might be a record for
yeah.
anything that I'm involved with. So I'm gonna, if everyone's okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. I think I've seen some notes coming through as we've been running through, and I think Christine, you were gonna act as facilitator, right, on those?
Yes, loads of comments coming through, and I mean, just firstly as well, say thank you for such an engaging demo, and it's amazing just to see the ability of some of these tools. I'm very much at that point of kind of trying to use it. It's not quite working. I get a bit annoyed. So this kind of thing always inspires me.
And just to kind of clarify that point, these are always just like thought starters and initial drafts. These are definitely not, the more you use them and the more trainings you go on, the more you will learn that whilst it looks impressive, there is still like a heavy lift to do for the human. It's just you get to that point of insight and application of human intelligence a lot quicker than kind of having writer's block and spending a day or two working on a press release or whatever it is. You just get to add in the elements better, which creates better work ultimately. So don't think that this is replacing us. It does sometimes feel like that on demos, but that's absolutely not the case.
Definitely. I mean, I think there's been a lot of comments in the chat around Perplexity and just its amazing abilities, really. So questions around the kind of difference of the free and the paid version. And Simon, I know you shared some information on that, but I guess from your perspectives, what are the kind of the big differences between the paid for and the pro version of Perplexity, and also how accurate is it?
Do you want to go first, Carmen?
Yeah. We have actually demonstrated it and tried it with the non-pro version as well. There are a couple of the features that are not necessarily available if you don't have the pro version. So I guess it depends on what sort of thing you're using it for, I guess is the other sort of question.
Yeah, I find that I've used a mix of the free and the pro version. The pro version, I mean, fundamentally gives you a lot more pro searches, which means it's using more advanced AI models. But ultimately, I mean, for everyday use, the free version is perfectly fine. And also you do get 5 pro searches a day as well. So if you're asking it to do a bit more heavy lifting for you, or slightly more complex ask, you can just turn that pro version on for that search. But otherwise, I mean, Perplexity has essentially replaced my other search engines. So I use that as my go-to for factual information at the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you. We've also probably quite understandably had a few questions around copyright and who owns the content. So it does using some of these AI tools throw up copyright issues in terms of what has been scraped from the internet and who owns your creation. And similarly with the images and some of the image platforms that you shared, do you have the rights to those images?
It varies. So generally, no. I think with any of these tools, whether it's text or image, it's all for thought starters and inspiration. So look at them as kind of initial research tools. Always be very cautious of the outputs. They're essentially an aid or a tool to just help facilitate your work. They're not a solution to replace your work. With regard to image rights, we as an organization have an agreement with Adobe to use Firefly. So some of those images are protected by indemnity, which essentially means that Adobe would protect us if anyone came after us with a copyright issue. But our general rule and guidance is that, well, no text and no image should be used for commercial purposes unless you're completely convinced that you've got the rights to use those. Even some of the platforms like Midjourney, for example, are a little bit vague where they say you're able to use the images for commercial purposes in line with local jurisdiction guidance. But actually, most jurisdictions don't really have guidance on this at the moment. So that's a bit of a cop out for them. So no, use it purely for inspiration, unless you have a contract with the likes of Adobe or Shutterstock or Getty to use one of their AI image generation tools.
I think that's a really good steer on
Yeah.
that one. Thank you.
We have these like slides with loads of like red font all over them to say check with legal on everything.
Always very sensible to have that approach.
Which they love, obviously.
And then we've had a few questions as well relating to really, I guess, your your position as an agency, I mean, do you have an AI policy for your clients for transparency, or what advice do you share with your clients when how you're using AI in your work?
Yeah, so yes, we do. So we've worked really closely with our legal teams. So our agency policy is that for internal use, we can use generative AI tools for initial ideation, inspiration, first drafts, but we, under no circumstances, can automatically push out the content that's created to our clients or to external audiences or for commercial purposes. We, even if we are, pitching an idea or giving a presentation that has a AI generated image, we will put a disclaimer on there to say that that image was generated by AI. And then if that is used for inspiration for a final campaign or any sort of usage, we would need to go through a really heavy process of vetting and editing and making sure that we're creating bespoke content off the back of it. So we're really transparent and clear at every step. And actually, we're receiving requests either directly from legal teams or via RFIs to declare what tools we use, how we use them, and everything else. And we are given directives as well by clients about which tools we can and can't use. So we have built our own internal safe, secure sandbox to do all of our internal work, but sometimes we're required to use other tools that our clients insist that we use. So it also varies on a case-by-case basis, but we have to be transparent on that.
Definitely. Thank you. I mean, another question that's come through is around security and confidentiality. So some organisations do prefer things like MS Copilot, where they have quite clear parameters around the security. So how do you ensure things like security, GDPR, etc., with ChatGPT and some of the other tools that are used?
So again, it's all as part of the same policy, I suppose, where we have a very strict governance on what we use the tools for. So we don't put any client information in. Like today in the demo, we put a brand name, but we would probably even avoid doing that for any of our work. So we absolutely don't input any confidential client data. We can use public domain sources of information if we want to use those to synthesize them. But yeah, we essentially just avoid any risk whatsoever when it comes to input of client information or any other sensitive information.
Thank you. And we've had a couple of questions on other tools that could be used. So firstly, one thinking about those who are working with smaller budgets.
Yeah.
So with a finite budget for tools and software, where would you say comms professionals should start with premium model investment?
Premium. I mean, there are a number of tools out there for PR people. So there's stuff from Profit and Propel and Muckrack and Copy AI and everything else. We've had kind of fairly mixed and indifferent experiences with those, and I would say that what you get out of those, you could probably get out of ChatGPT and Perplexity. So I would say go for those tools. I think for image generation, that's all on personal preference. Like I absolutely love Midjourney, and I've worked hard to train myself how to use it as a tool. So for images, I would always go for that, but only for ideation. And those cost structures range between kind of like anywhere between $10 and $60 a month. ChatGPT Pro license is, I think, $24 a month, something like that. And there are benefits to that because then you can start creating custom GPTs or using other people's GPTs for more niche specific research. So I would say those are probably safe options to at least get started with. And they're not prohibitive on cost at all, really, unless you're buying big Copilot enterprise licenses and things like that.
Great, thank you. And kind of a more specific question to university sector really is, could AI assist in research analysis? And if so, what tools would be most appropriate for research analysis?
Can I defer that to you, Carmen?
Yeah, absolutely. There are actually a lot of companies, especially in the health sector, who are already using GPT-based tools. It is something really interesting that we see in terms of they need the technology to analyze either research or data or findings. They may not have that technology in-house, and so what we anticipate seeing is a lot of acquisitions in that particular space. But certainly, I would say that certainly, at least in the pharmaceutical sector, the people in the research section are better at using these new technologies and generative AI and knowledge graphs and powering their research with that than, say, for example, the comms people are. And so I think already this technology is heavily being used in the research field. And then, of course, you have things where we've been asked to occasionally build interfaces that read huge data sets and give regular communications and marketing professionals insights into really big data sets, for example, so that they can query it just in natural language in English and find some insights from the data that they see. So yes, definitely a huge scope for research, and we're already seeing that happen.
I guess in a similar vein, really, I mean, do any of the tools have really good things like plagiarism checkers in them?
We do actually have a couple of the plagiarism checkers that are available. There is an Originality, which I think is actually a paid product, and then there's one called GPT-0. We've tested them. They measure to a fairly good degree of accuracy whether or not something is AI generated or human generated. And we've run through a couple of different iterations where we generate something in AI, we adapt it in human language, and it still says this was probably originated by AI. It gives you a probability. What it does is actually analyze the syntax of how a human would speak in terms of randomness. And then I suppose it spots a lack of randomness in the output and it marks it as AI, really. So I think they're fairly good in terms of checking and fairly accurate. But of course, your mileage may vary depending on what you're checking.
Thank you. I'm aware we're almost at time. So I'm just going to end on a slightly different question that came through from Rob. So given the increasing ubiquity of AI generated content, particularly where it's being used in an unaltered fashion, do you see there being an opportunity for that high quality original human content to stand out? And I guess, adding to that, do you see that being a kind of future area of division really in the world that we're working in?
Yeah, it's a conversation we have a lot with clients and at industry events. And because initially people thought that the tools would overtake the kind of copywriting element or the ideation of thoughts and concepts. But actually, the more we've used the tools, the more we're learning about them, it feels like there's a greater need than ever for human nuance, because we are getting inundated with that kind of auto-generated content, which creates this echo chamber, but also creates this like cycle of monotonous, mediocre content. And it's going to be harder than ever to stand out, especially in kind of the social media environment where people are able to make really rich media really easily and really quickly. But actually, the more that you experiment with the tools, the more you can see it, right? Like you can see the telltale signs of that content. So yes, there's going to be huge demand for that human nuance. I think what we're seeing is that the tools are creating a really heavy lift for humans with regard to insights and information gathering, but then the humans still need to take over at that point of insight. So it's expediting that initial process, but it gives us more to work with. It gives us broader diversity of thought. It gives us surprising ideas and concepts and helps us up-level our work. But not only that, the nuance can be nuanced further so that we are targeting micro communities and not doing a one message fits all type approach that we're used to, because we are now able to generate that content more quickly. So yes, we definitely need people to be thinking harder and smarter about how they break through. So there's just two questions on the chat I wanted to quickly address. What do we think of Jasper? Everything is personal preference. So I would encourage you to, if you're going to use ChatGPT, you can also try Jasper and Claude and Gemini. Try them all out. They all have free versions, and you can see what you prefer, and you'll start to see what the differences are between them. Somebody asked about access to DALL-E. Yes, you do need the pro version of ChatGPT, but if you go to Microsoft Bing image generator, it essentially uses DALL-E as its image, it's the same technology. So you can access it for free that way. So I just wanted to cover off those two questions.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think just on the last question as well, there was another question that came in about whether using AI for basic PR tasks will reduce the number or scope of entry-level jobs. And it sounds like we're saying, no, it won't, but actually it'll just change what some of those jobs are doing, really.
Yeah, the industry is going to change, and it already is. We don't necessarily know exactly how, but really it's going to erode the stuff that most humans don't enjoy doing anyway, and the stuff that shouldn't take as much time as it takes already. Which means we can, while we might automate some of that like drudgery, we'll still need people of all levels to be able to help us understand how we translate those insights into impactful, meaningful messaging and content that drives whatever our objectives are with particular audiences and communities and micro communities.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, James and Carmen. That's been absolutely brilliant. I mean, looking at all the comments in the chats, people have really valued everything you shared, and it's been a brilliant demo, and to see it kind of happening in front of you is amazing and really inspiring. So huge thanks for doing this. We will obviously share the slides, and there will be a recording made available as well, so you can go back and refer to it. And I just want to hand over to our the committee chair, Anne, who I think just wanted to say a few words for closing. And Anne, your phone, I know you're on it twice because of sound issues, so you just need to unmute on your other, if you unmute on your phone, and then hopefully we can hear you properly.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, no, I mean, just reiterate what Christine said. I mean, that's been so interesting because I've been playing around with ChatGPT, and my prompts haven't been very good. So just to understand how to shape prompts, I mean, that has been just terribly useful. I'd never heard of Perplexity, so I shall immediately go away and start using it, because I've got a project and it would just be ideal for that. But so big thanks.
No problem. You're welcome. And
Yeah.
thanks for inviting us. It was great.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining. Apologies, we've gone a few minutes over. I'm sure we could talk about this topic all day, to be honest, because there's so much to cover. But huge thanks again. And we'll also hopefully do a summary of this on our CIPR Education and Skills Group LinkedIn blog as well. So please do keep an eye on that. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.